The true crime reporter never settles for standing outside the yellow crime scene tape. You knock on doors, dig through records, and cultivate sources to get to the bottom of the story. I'm Robert Riggs, the host and creator of the True Crime Reporter podcast, back with another story from 3 decades of investigative reporting. In this episode, I pulled out my reporter's notebooks. My law enforcement sources opened up their confidential case files. We sat down together to talk. And you can listen in to our journey into darkness. But before you do, be advised that this podcast is for a mature audience and not for the faint of heart. Some episodes may contain profanity and graphic details of violent crimes. To follow True Crime Reporter, text True Crime to 33777. Text True Crime, that's 2 words, True Crime, to 33777. With that said, here we go on another journey into darkness. Kenneth McDuff's confidential prison records contained plenty of warning signs that he was a psychopathic killer. Parole Board Chairman James Granberry repeatedly intervened in McDuff's case to set him free, and claimed McDuff would make a useful citizen. But McDuff's daughter alleged a $25,000 bribe greased palms to open the prison gate. In this episode, we learn that Granberry used a secret process called special review to let a hate crime killer out of prison in exchange for 2 cars. A hate crime killer, a serial child predator, and one of Kenneth McDuff's prison pals, a violent serial rapist, passed through the revolving door of Texas corrupt parole and prison systems. All of them were denied parole, but a secret panel called Special Review overrode those denials and let them go free. The son of a wealthy Dallas business executive who killed a 22-year-old African-American man received one of those special reviews. The killer unloaded 3 shotgun blasts into a Tyler, Texas nightclub. Michael Stevenson, a random hate crime victim, died in the arms of his brother.
It's been really hard to figure out why. I just feel like we arrived at the wrong place at the wrong time that night, and this guy didn't care who it was because the witnesses, his next door neighbor and his girlfriend testified against him and said he had told them that he was going to go out there if that happened and kill him a nigger.
The parole board denied parole for the convicted killer, but 3 days later, James Granberry approved his parole using the secret special review. 2 months later, Granberry received 2 cars from the killer's wealthy father. John Moriarty worked on the federal grand jury investigation of James Granberry.
This seemed to me to be the perfect crime because Texas is under pressure to release, hundreds and hundreds of inmates. So who's going to notice that I'm taking money to let the worst of the worst out?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they're feeding off the system. They're taking advantage of an opportunity, a business opportunity in their minds. There was one case of a murderer whose son was released because he paid some money to have the parole board deal with the situation. And
I did a report that there was a wealthy Dallas businessman who gave the parole board chairman and his girlfriend 2 cars in exchange for his son, who had committed a murder, which was really a hate crime, and he got out.
That's correct. That's the case I'm talking about.
Yeah. So what struck me about that was that, boy, life was pretty cheap. Just two cars to get a murderer out.
Yeah, one of the cars went to the parole board chairman's girlfriend who worked at the parole office in Austin, and one went to him.
But a person listening with this would think, oh, this must cost hundreds of thousands of dollars.
No, it's relatively cheap. Its volume is what they look for. I mean, God knows how many more it happened to.
It also happened to Curtis Frank Brooks, a serial rapist and pal of serial killer Kenneth McDuff. Brooks served less than 20 years of a 99-year life sentence, thanks to a special review by Parole Board Chairman James Granberry. Granberry and a parole board crony approved Brooks' parole in April of 1990 over the protest of his rape victims. I was investigating Brooks' relationship with McDuff and his secret special review parole when it came to my attention Brooks was the subject of a statewide manhunt. During a 1-month crime spree, Brooks brutally beat and raped 5 women, kidnapped 2 others, committed 7 armed robberies, and 1 home invasion in 7 Texas cities. He committed dozens of other rapes and robberies in a 4-state rampage. As I prepared to broadcast my report, the police scanners in the newsroom erupted with a high-speed chase in progress. Irving, Texas police pursued a bank robber driving a stolen Lexus. The armed robber jumped a freeway median and headed the wrong way into heavy traffic. He slammed head-on into another vehicle, killing its driver. Police pulled the bank robber from the twisted, burning wreckage, saving his life. It was McDuff's buddy, Curtis Frank Brooks, another violent ex-con who should have been behind bars for the rest of his life. Bill Johnston, the former U.S. attorney who investigated the Texas parole system, says it resembled the corruption portrayed in the movie Shawshank Redemption.
I had no idea those things were going on. And I thought that Texas's system had been corrupted and turned into a system, who knows who, and where you're dealing with people's lives and you're dealing with future crimes as if it's something to be traded or bartered for a favor or for something else. And I was just shocked. I mean, the whole system was, and a lot of it was former parole board members or staffers that had turned into so-called consultants. It was a terribly cheap, trashy process that had developed.
So what did you make of Granberry? Here was a man, he'd been a dentist, respected mayor of Lubbock, first candidate for Republican governor. But there's another side to this man.
It was so weird. And you always want to make sure you're not getting carried away with some story. But there were too many stories and too many credible people that were saying, this guy's weird. And he has these weird relationships with these consultants and others on the parole board, these personal indiscretions and so forth. It was really an odd deal. He was two people, and one of them was really bad.
Granberry had this thing called special review where he would, an inmate was denied parole, he would go in behind them and approve them for parole. And actually had a female board member began raising questions about it because she was seeing people out committing crimes in the newspaper that she'd voted against. And then suddenly she started getting threats. And she was scared to death and left the board.
Wow. Yeah, I think he developed a system within the system, as you say, sort of a backup plan to get people out. He abused his authority, obviously terribly, and it led to some real tragedy, a great amount of tragedy.
Johnston says his investigation could not quickly find direct evidence to connect James Granberry to the $25,000 bribery scheme to get serial killer Kenneth McDuff out of prison on parole. The former prosecutor says he did the next best thing. He busted the former parole board chairman turned parole consultant for income tax evasion.
And, old Al Capone didn't go to Alcatraz for being a gangster. He did it for tax evasion. He went for tax evasion. So I wanted to look at Granberry's financial situation as much as I could and we learned that he had, in a given year, this sounds petty, but I'm sorry, that he had sold a huge apartment complex in Lubbock. And one of my assistants had been with the tax division, was very familiar with all the tax law. And so Granberry had sold for a few $1 million, I believe, this big apartment complex. And my assistant said, I bet you he didn't recapture his depreciation. And I wasn't really familiar with recapture depreciation, but an analysis of the whole thing showed, yeah, he didn't recapture any of it. He didn't pay any tax on the sale. He would have had to have gone to establish a new basis. This is very taxy, I know.
Right.
But the point is, he evaded taxes, and not $10,000 or $20,000, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars.
So basically, like Al Capone, you got him on taxes.
I got him on taxes. And I was satisfied that he had been exposed, honestly by you, Robert, but he had been exposed. He had been exposed for what he was. The system had been exposed and was starting to be, again, because of your work, was being peeled back many layers at a time now, quickly. And that I wanted to get him a conviction. And it for me at the time was a pretty good resolution. Mm-hmm. So, but it was only felony I had immediately.
John Moriarty, who investigated Granberry and later became the Inspector General of the Texas Department of Criminal Justice, says the 30-year-old Kenneth McDuff parole case should not be forgotten.
The bottom line is that, in my opinion, the people that make decisions on who gets released shouldn't be political appointments. That's the bottom line. It should be professionals that, understand convicts and understand psychopaths and can't be compromised, pay them well enough to make those decisions. But when you're, I had another parole board chairman tell me, and it's I believe the best analysis of the parole system is that 20% should never get out. 20% of them. 20% will get out just after serving their little bit of time. It's that 60% in the middle that we got the problem with. And making an educated decision, not a political decision, on is the only thing that's saving the public.
Next on True Crime Reporter, we expose the shadowy world of shakedowns by parole consultants.
Well, I was talking to Bill Johnston during the course of the investigation, and we knew something was seriously wrong. And so we ended up looking at some of these other files that you're talking about, and there was a shakedown operation pretty much going on with these guys who were shakedown operation going on with some of these murderers and other major criminals whose family members were wealthy. And we targeted a couple of the cases as well as looking at a couple of the parole board members.
Aren't you glad it's not a crime to love reality TV? Hey, true crime lovers, this is Shannon, one of the researchers for this podcast. Paper Chaser Paper Goods is your go-to spot for all of your reality TV obsessions. Check out paperchaserpaper.com and channel your love of the Real Housewives with Paper Chaser's reality TV-themed gifts. From cocktail napkins to Bravo TV-themed invitations, Paper Chaser has everything you need to host happy hour at your place and be the it girl of your inner circle. Now remember, it's not a crime to love reality TV. Paper Chaser believes life's a party, so celebrate something every day. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram for the latest Paper Chaser and reality TV scoop. We'll see you on paperchaserpaper.com.
True Crime Reporter is a trademarked and copyrighted news show. It is an original co-production with Podcast Ad Reps. Hosted and written by me, Robert Riggs. Executive producer Elizabeth Arnold. Audio production by Matt Stoker. Original music by Blair King. Associate producer, Siler Burr. Social media producer, Grace Woodward. Publicity, Tim Livingston, PR. Photography, Igor Krgulats. Graphics, Brian David Kerr Designs. Special thanks to Gary Laverne, author of Bad Boy from Rosebud, The Murderous Life of Kenneth Allen McDuff. The audio recordings of the Senate Criminal Justice Committee hearings are courtesy of the Texas State Archives. Archive sound bites included in the episodes are from my original Reporter's Notebook tape recordings. And for our listeners who stayed to hear the credits, here's a little bonus.
What do you say for the future? What do you say that we should always be on the lookout for?
We should never forget what happened. And thank goodness you're informing people. I doubt that, 1 in 30 or 40 or 50 Texans right now would even remember or have have the gravity of what happened. So most people have already forgotten. But it's important to know what happened because it can absolutely repeat itself. And what you look for is people who shouldn't be out of prison committing crimes. That's as simple as it is. You look for people that should be in prison committing crimes. After all those McDuff laws were passed and people had to serve a larger portion of their sentence, everything really tightened down. They had this enormous prison construction where the prisons, every other town in Texas has got a prison with it now. That wasn't the case. It was almost exclusively in Huntsville in the old days. So for many years after that, people served a high percentage of their sentences, even for less than terrible crimes, and people for violent crimes served, 3/4 or more of the sentence, or they're still there. But I can tell you that now you do see people serving an eighth of their sentence, 10th of their sentence. And I'm not talking about violent people with the special findings, but it may be the first layer of erosion is what's happening now. That you have people who a jury may say you should do 20 years for, let's say, a drug crime. And after a year and a half or 2 years, they're out. And that's not what the jury intended. And that's not what people think is happening. Perhaps that's where the erosion begins. And then when people's memories are more faint, we'll start letting the violent people out. But all you need to look for, it's supposedly one of the problems with Chicago. I don't know that to be the case. But supposedly one of the problems in Chicago is that they have a very open bail bond system. So someone's arrested for a terrible crime and they're allowed bail. And then people who go to prison don't stay long. And so you have multi-time convicted people committing terrible crimes. That's what you look for. And that the system's either corrupt or broken in some fashion.